Join us on an exclusive trip to London in May 2025. Highlights of this tour are a glove-making masterclass with luxury designer Rena O, an embroidery workshop at Hand and Lock, a visit to a renowned theatrical costume house, and a guided tour of Savile Row. We'll also visit specialty fabric shops and enjoy afternoon tea at Fortnum and Mason. To find out more, go to threadsmagazine.com. Welcome to Sewing with Threads, the monthly podcast from Threads Magazine. Today we have a very special extended episode. Threads contributing editor Kenneth D. King has caught up with one of the sewing world's favorite superstars, Sandra Betzina. Kenneth and Sandra have known each other for some 35 years. It was Sandra who introduced Kenneth to the Threads audience back in 2003. Now Kenneth, who recently authored the book Doll Couture, is sharing his interview with Sandra. Sandra looks back at her successes as a sewing teacher, a designer, and an author, and the many challenges along the way as she settles into somewhat of a retirement. Let's listen in.
Today, I have the honor of interviewing Sandra Betzina, who I regard as the Auntie Mame of sewing. So she's been a sewing celebrity for quite a long time. We'll get into all of the details and such. I met you, Sandra. I don't know if you remember this. We met at that beading class at the sewing workshop back.
Oh, yeah, I remember.
Yeah, and then the story, and I tell this a lot because I laugh at it even today. We were at a dinner at Marcy Tilton's, and you were sitting right next to me. And in front of everyone, folks, she turned and looked at me and said, "You know, you have the most sensuous lips." Well, I don't blush often, but I did. The only thing I could think to do was like, and then she went on, and everyone, of course, is like listening to see what was going to happen next. And then she went on to say this thing like, you know, guys who have really good lips are usually terrific kissers. And I'm like, stop, please. And that's when I knew that we would be good friends. So welcome, Sandra. So you're in San Francisco. You're in your loft south of Market.
Right.
So, you know, let's just start with what you're doing now, and then we can kind of work back and go forward from there.
Well, what I'm doing now is mainly unpacking. I just moved a couple of weeks ago, and I would advise anyone, start getting rid of stuff before you move. You just accumulate so much stuff. It's incredible. So I'm giving away a lot. The hardest thing is your clothes, because I think we're sentimentally attached to them. And I'm doing it right and left, but I've got a big closet here, but it's not big enough. So I'm going to get rid. Yeah, I love to. So I'm retired now.
Okay.
What do? I read. I love to read. I love to sew. I will always sew. But I promised myself that I would not get near that machine until I finish this unpacking.
Yes.
So I don't have too much to go. Let's say I've got five more boxes.
Oh, that's quite an accomplishment.
It was really tiring, really. But, you know, I think it's going to be really happy here. I worried when I retired, oh, what am I going to do? But you know, it's funny. I finally get to see friends, which, you know, you probably find that you work so much, you don't get to see your friends, and cook. My husband and I both love to cook. So we have that. I love to read. I probably do that 4 hours a day. I don't know, the time just goes by. I'm really happy. It's crazy.
I'm glad to hear that. Now, speaking of reading, did you read my book?
Yes, I did.
Because I brought Crazy Bella.
Yeah, I loved it. I thought it was a cute.
Lola. So they're here listening in and taking notes so that we can get this as accurately as possible.
You must have fun making all those little small costumes.
Well, I'm experimenting. This is a new one.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard sewing little things like that. You think it's easy, but it's not as easy as real clothes, you know. It's the tiny little armholes and everything.
Well, so yeah. So anyway, okay. So let's start with, you know, because I have the thing that you sent me here, which has really been helpful. You were born in Washington, D.C. You spent your childhood in Catonsville, Maryland. Is that how you pronounce it?
Yeah, it's right outside of Baltimore, about 7 miles out of Baltimore.
And so, you know, what I see here is that you in high school, you discovered your passion for sewing. So now tell us more about that.
Well, in Baltimore, you boys had to take woodshop or car repair,
Mm,
and girls had to take cooking or sewing 1 hour a day.
mm,
And I already knew how to cook, so I thought I'll take sewing. I love sewing from the second I got there. I think it was our classes were small, 10 people. We all had our own machine. The teacher was wonderful. She didn't say to make an apron or anything. She said, make anything you want.
mm.
And she would help you. And very encouraging, kind, wonderful, wonderful woman. So I was obviously there every day. And then, but she knew I didn't have a sewing machine, and I was probably more obsessed than her other students. So she said, if you want to come at 3 o'clock every day, I leave at 4:30. School was over at 3:30. So I could sew for an hour and a half if I could get all the machines unjammed, and I got pretty fast at that.
Uh,
And so she and I got to know each other. So I did that for years, years. I did that every afternoon, and I just loved it. And so when I graduated, she said to me, I don't know what you're going to do with your life, but I would bet you do something with this. She said, never, never have I had a student that loved this as much as you did. And I think one of the reasons I've been successful is I really love sewing and I really love fashion
mm.
and just love both of them. I never set out to be famous, any of those things. I just wanted to sew and make my own clothes.
So and I'm just curious, what was the first thing you made?
I made a dress that had, believe it or not, 14 buttonholes down the front, a little dress, a little blue knit dress. And my buttonholes were all different sizes, but she showed me how I could do 2 buttons in a big one. It was great. I loved it. And I underlined it in an old sheet. I still have it.
Wow.
So so that's how it started. And then in college, I went to college on a scholarship, so I needed some extra money. And I started sewing for some people, but I realized that most people, they want to look like the picture on the pattern. And a lot of them didn't. And they would blame me. And I thought, I love this so much. I'm not going to do this for a living. So instead, I cut people's hair, those long hair. I didn't know what I was doing. But I loved college. I had a great time. I really did. I had wonderful boyfriends. It was really fun. And
What was
then,
your major in college? What was your
pardon?
major
Oh,
in college?
my major started out being mathematics. And that was sounds crazy. And then I took lots of writing classes. I love to write. I read something that said, writers have to write. And I think it is so true. And I was writing that little thing, just a little outline for you. I
Mm.
thought, I love writing. And I have 4 children and I write them letters. And I don't know, there's something nice about that. And my last year of college, I got a job as a speechwriter for somebody that was the head of the library service.
Mm.
And it was a terrible job because he had no sense of humor. And I could not resist putting in little quips and he'd take every one of them out. But it enabled me to save money to go on a trip to Europe. So that's what I did.
Yeah. So now, where in Europe? What was the itinerary?
Oh, let's see. Started out in Berlin. And then, just went all over the place. Paris, I'd never been anywhere. So
Mm.
just went, and I had a couple of girlfriends who I traveled with. Can you hear the trolley here?
Oh, yeah.
This is life in the city. I traveled with a couple of girlfriends for a while, and then they got tired, went home. And I didn't go to Spain then. I meet different people, got on the train. I've never been kind of a scaredy cat. I don't mind being alone.
Mm.
So then coming home, I traded in my ticket and came back on Holland American line,
Uh-huh.
which was 10 days. And I got a little love affair going on that trip. And it, it was, so then I came home and I thought, I never in my life got a suntan. And I was laying out in the backyard and my father comes out. I had been home for just a few days. And he said, so what's your plan? And I said, finally, I'm going to get a suntan. He said, well, you know what they say about fish? After 3 days, they begin to smell. Boy, I hopped up off that thing and I had a car. I borrowed my father's car, went to Washington, D.C., and I saw the sign outside of Sabina that said they were looking for employees. I thought, that's it. I want to travel. I don't want to stay home. So I took that job for 4 years, and it was awesome. The thing was awesome about it is that it was run by a man called Baron D. Tarnowski, and he always wanted to be talked about like that. And there were 8 of us in the office, and he would allow 4 to travel as long as there were 4 in the office. Now, in those days in the airline, I know it's different now, but the international carriers, they all had these reciprocal agreements. So we could travel on any airline for $10 first class and $2 economy, space available. But nobody was ever in first class. So usually took first class. And I went all over the world. It was amazing. And I did that for 4 years. And I got married during that time. And I married a lawyer who his boss was a Supreme Court judge. And he thought my job was the living end. He could not believe this. And he was a widow. And he just went with us often. And because he really didn't have family. And so the 3 of us would go someplace, and he'd take us out to dinner to places we could never afford. It was a wonderful time.
Is this Dan, or is Dan later?
No, this is my first husband.
I was reading that going, is that?
I met this husband at a bus stop in a snowstorm. The bus didn't come for 2 hours, and we really got to know each other. I married him probably too quickly. No, not so much too quickly. I was too young. 24 is too young to get married. I don't think you know yourself well enough. And I stayed married to him for 7 years. He was the nicest man, the smartest man. Why did I leave him? I wanted to have fun. I remember I talked to my dad, and he asked me, he said, why would you divorce him? And I said, I just want to have fun. I think it was more, my father was very strict, and I just didn't want anybody telling me what to do anymore. And so I think it's probably the one regret I have, because not that I'm not happy with my husband now, but he was such a nice man, and he did not deserve to be hurt like that. And so I was married to him for 7 years. That's what made us move to San Francisco. And we had a little girl. And so she was about a little less than 1 when I struck out on my own. And I was very against the way divorces were set up, that the man always had to pay alimony and child support. And so I decided, since I was the one leaving, I didn't want him to pay anything. So I borrowed $300 a month for a year. And I lived, let's see, you know this neighborhood. It's Mission and 17th.
Now, is that what the neighborhood you referred to as the Park and Run?
Yes.
Okay.
Only I didn't have a car. And so one day I came, it was a furnished apartment for $100 a month.
Wow.
And the only furniture I took was Kim's crib and my clothes and a couple of pillows. And that was it. But I had a good time down there. And but one day I came home, and the whole front door, somebody had broken in, and the whole front door was laying inside. But I didn't have anything to steal. So that went on for 2 years. And I wasn't working then. That's why I borrowed the $300 a month. But then I started, Marjorie Arch decided she was a really neat woman, and she wanted to start sewing schools all over the country. And she would train people. And I was one of the people she trained, and it was wonderful. But I think her dream was too big, because she'd get everybody trained and they'd get married, so I was one of the ones that kept going on with it. And another one was Patty Palmer. She was there too.
Okay.
And so Patty's done all kinds of things over the years.
Patty's daughter lives in New York. I've seen her on occasion.
Oh, she does. Okay. Well, her mother was in the training with me. And isn't she running her mother's company now? I don't know.
I don't know. I know that I think she has a pattern line, and she does some other things. Yeah.
Okay. So then I decided rents were not like they were now. So I rented a place for about, I think it was $200 a month. And the landlord said, you don't have to sign a lease. Let's see if your idea works. Because he didn't know anybody wanted to do a sewing school. So I went and bought some office tables for about $30 a piece.
Mm.
And I'm in business. But just setting up business is not so easy. You need students.
Sure.
And the ads were so expensive. I put one ad in the Chronicle
Mm.
and it was $600. I put this ad and I love to sew so much. I put this ad in there and said I could teach anybody to sew. I did not get one phone call and it cost $600. So that's when I got.
That was quite expensive.
That was a lot. I mean, but I thought otherwise I'm just going to be sitting here in this room. I remember one man walked and asked me if I could fix the zipper in his pants, and I actually did it.
Uh-huh.
He went in the bathroom. Oh, crazy. So anyway, then I got this idea if I could get some credibility. So there was a sewing column in the paper, but it wasn't very good. It was a man. He was always writing about hemming.
Mm.
And I had a lot of things that I could write about. And so I got a hold of the woman at the Chronicle, and I had 9 columns that I thought would work.
Mm.
And I remember I'm not really a liar, but I lied to get to see her. I could never get in on the phone.
Yeah.
And so finally the operator said, and what is this regarding? And I said, I'm having lunch with Ruth Miller and I need to change the time.
Mm.
And so she put me through.
Oh.
And so Ruth started talking to me. And then after a while, I told her my idea. And she said, out of curiosity, how did you get through today? And I said, well, I lied. I told you we were having lunch and I needed to change the time. And she said, what time are we having lunch? So I picked her up that day.
Wow.
And she was wonderful. But she read everything that I said. And she said, you have good ideas, but you don't know how to write for the newspaper. Most people are not going to read past the first paragraph. So she said, if you'll give this to me, we'll go back and forth and I'll teach you how to write for that, how to shorten it up.
Mm-hmm.
So we went back and forth probably 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And she took it and she had me syndicated all over the United States within 3 weeks.
So
It was
now,
amazing.
time frame, when was this all happening?
Oh, let me think. I think about 1970.
Okay.
72.
Wow.
Okay.
Okay.
And it happened to be syndicated in the Baltimore Sun, where my sewing teacher lived.
Wow.
So when I went back for my high school reunion, my sewing teacher was there, and it was just really nice. I said, it was all thanks to you, and which it was.
Wow.
And so that really helped my business tremendously, because then people, knew there was sewing classes and things. And then I got the idea, okay, maybe what I should do is try to get on television, which is crazy because I didn't even at the time own a television. All the stations, they had like talk shows.
Yeah.
And morning shows. And so I got the idea that if I could do a little segment on television, that maybe some people would know about my sewing school. So I started doing that. And I went on People Are Talking, met a lovely woman, Ann Fraser. She was wonderful. She was the host.
Mm-hmm.
And we did this for 7 years. Until then, it would have gone on indefinitely, except they started doing syndicated shows and they didn't want to spend the money to do, the individual shows. So I did that. And let's see. Meanwhile, I'm teaching. Everything is going fine. I went to a bigger space down on Taraval Street. And I would then, but by then my family was growing because I'd met Dan. And he and I had this one thing in common. We wanted a lot of children.
Okay.
And I wasn't sure I wanted to get married. I had this hang up that marriage was going to trap me. So he agreed that we'd buy a set of flats and have children. And if I didn't like being married, I could live one and he'd live the other, and we'd let the kids run all around. So that's how it started. I got pregnant within about 10 days and had a little boy. And then, so then what made me rethink my career is when Sean was 1, I got a call from one of the students that I had another teacher teaching and she didn't show up.
Okay.
And so I felt I had to leave, but it happened to be Sean's first birthday and all these people were there, but there's no way I could just leave it. So I went and taught and I also happened to be pregnant with twins.
Okay.
So I decided then it is time to let this go. I remember it was one of the saddest days of my life. I thought I have never loved doing anything as much as I love this. But I've got to get really, how am I going to do all this? So I had two people that took a lot of classes from me. One was Lynn Mannix and one was Marcy Tilton.
Okay.
And Lynn was the one that wanted to buy the school. So I said, okay, I can't get over it now. I sold it for $5,000. That included 10 sewing machines.
Okay.
All the everything. Well, she decided within a year that she wanted to become a psychotherapist.
Okay.
So she closed the school. And Marcy was thinking about opening a school. And I said, just open your own name. Just do it. Don't use my name. Just that's gone. Yeah. Now you do what you want to do. So she did this. She started the sewing workshop, and she taught there, and I taught there too. We both taught there a lot. But
when did the sewing workshop start?
Now let's see, how long ago? Boy, Marcy would know this. Maybe 80.
Okay.
19. And
let's take a side on that. I just want to credit everyone. I want to say that it was Sandra who was the one that arm twisted Marcy Tilton to get me to teach a class. And that was no, seriously, that was in 1989, I think it was.
Yeah.
And so I just want to give credit where credit is due. I would not be where I am without Sandra Betzina. So back to you, Sandra. Yes.
You were so talented. Someone would have found you. I don't worry about that.
Okay, so back to the story. So Marcy started the school.
And she ran it for. I don't think Marcy loved teaching. Marcy's a good businesswoman, and she sells fabric. She's doing really well. I don't think she was obsessed with teaching as much as I was. I remember you said that to me one time. You said to me, "Do you still love teaching?" I said, "Yes." I would rather. I don't know. I really love doing that. And so then I stopped. Let's see. I stopped teaching for I think about a year because I was busy, and I was up. We have a little country house above. I don't know whether you know Mendocino. It's Northern California, and we had a house up there a block from the water. And I decided if I'm going to have children, I'll work, but I'm never going to work in the summer. So the day school ended before the day school back, I had 3 months with the kids. It was the best time of my life. I mean, we had no television there. It was crazy. I did all kinds of things. I baked blackberry pies every day. I had speech writing contests. We had 14 kids in town, and they were pretty much at my house all the time. And I got to know all the kids. It was the most wonderful, wonderful time. So then I guess I'm trying to remember when this was, when they were, I think I gave you a date, when the kids were maybe about 5 or 6, I got a call from Home and Garden Television.
Okay.
And they told me they were they're a big network, and they're looking for a host to host a sewing show. And I remember thinking, if they're such a big network, why have I never heard of them? Because at that time, I was the first show they signed on.
Really?
Yeah. So I went there, interviewed for the job, and got the job. And in the beginning, I was on about 3 times a day for probably a couple of years because they didn't have any other shows. Then they got the car repair guys. It ended up, Home and Garden was an incredible network in the beginning. You learned how to do so many things. Now I feel it's changed.
Yeah.
All these house things, and not that I don't like the house things, but enough is enough.
Yeah.
And so I did that. But at first I wasn't sure I could do it because I thought, gee, this is in Knoxville, Tennessee. How am I going to do this with the family? But they said, we do it in blocks of time. So we would film in blocks of time, and it would be 2 weeks. And because I wasn't nervous, I probably should have been, but I could film 4 shows a day. They used to call me the one take wonder because I don't know, even if I goofed up, I'd say, well, because that's what happens in sewing. You make mistakes and you fix them,
Yeah.
So I did that. I did, I think, 250 shows over 6 years. Then what happened there was that I guess Hancock owned the name So Perfect. And they were they were becoming pretty demanding in that they wanted their products mentioned every time, and they wanted guests that were selling things. And I said, well, that's not really me. I don't want to do that. I mean, so I stopped doing that.
Yeah.
So that was okay. On to the next, whatever the next is. So I stopped doing that. Let's see, what did I do next? Then around that time, my brother was doing some fundraising for Ethiopia for this school. And it was a school in Ethiopia. You could go to school to the fourth grade for free, but then it cost money for the uniforms. Most Ethiopians couldn't afford it. So my brother wanted me to meet the head of the school. He said, I think you could help her set up a program. And I said, Doug, it's not like I'm doing nothing here. But I said, I'll meet her, but I don't want you with me because you talk me, my brother can talk me into anything. So I met her. And I'll just tell you this, it was the most delightful time because she said to me, when we sat down for dinner, she said, do you know where I could buy patent leather shoes? And I said, well, probably the department store. She said, well, I went there, but they're so expensive. And I said, well, I was just down at the secondhand store and there's a pair of patent leather shoes. I don't know what size they are. She said, it doesn't matter what size they are. The little girl has AIDS and she's dying and she just wants a pair of patent leather shoes. So we told the waiter, hold it, because we were eating really early. We ran down and bought these patent leather shoes for $10 and she took them to Ethiopia. At that moment, I fell in love with her. And she runs a foundation called Project Mercy. She died this year. And so her thing was.
Well, first off, what is her name?
Oh, Marta, Marta. She just goes by Marta, and it's Project Mercy.
Okay.
And wonderful couple. And my brother met them when she went to Oxford. That's where she met my brother. Okay. And so she was always talking to him about her dream for Ethiopia was people had to get educated. And so she had this school, and by this time there were 2,000 kids in the school. She would only take one per family, and kids would stand outside the gates hoping somebody wouldn't show up, and then they would be invited in. And I'll tell you, I've never seen anything like it. The size of a typical school desk, they would have 3 people sitting at that desk, 90 in a class. You could have heard a pin drop. They were so respectful. And this school didn't go to the 4th grade. It went to the 12th grade. And at grade 10, if you were not deemed college material, you would take a class like mine. So I had set up a sewing studio. Then there was cooking. And for the guys, they did pipe fitting and electricity. It was an incredible concept. And I would stay a month. I did this for about 5 years. The problem was I could never talk anybody else into going with me and carrying it on past this. And then that was one problem. And the second problem is after I taught people to sew, they could make money going into the town doing alterations. So, I mean, it was good from that point of view, but it's just her dream was just to have this run indefinitely. And unless I'd been willing to move there, which I love Ethiopia, but I wasn't willing to move there. So that was another part of my life. So let's see, where are we now? We're not doing home. Oh, okay. Now the internet is heating up.
Yes.
And I'm thinking, if everybody is going to have computers like they say they are, then maybe I could teach sewing online and be free. And so by this time I knew Ron Collins well, because we met up in Canada teaching up there. And so he and I teamed up and did a show called Power Sewing Web TV. Now, it was expensive to do. It cost me about $100,000 a year.
Wow.
But I made money doing other things, teaching, whatever, writing books. For me, I didn't feel I had to make money. I just wanted to make it. So it was kind of, I'd say, maybe a vanity project. But people liked it. And now, it's funny, my brother asked me, he said, what's your legacy? I said, legacy? I don't have a legacy. And then I realized maybe I do.
Oh, I would think so, yeah. You have your books, you have your videos, you have HGTV. You have a huge legacy. I would.
Well, I just didn't even think. So I put all of my shows, 258, we do 2 a week, on YouTube for free. So anybody can watch them anytime. In the meantime, I wrote a lot of books. I love to write. And so I think I've written about eight or 10 books.
Mhm.
And when I first retired, I remember the first week I thought, what in the heck am I going to do? So I thought the kids always wanted me to write a cookbook because we have a lot of things that just our family makes. So I did a cookbook and I got somebody to do cartoons and it was really fun. And then by then I was getting used to staying home and of course I didn't really exactly stay home. I mean, before I guess the last 20 years I've traveled and taught all over at all the guilds and various fabric stores like you did.
Yeah.
I don't think you do it so much anymore because you're teaching in New York. You
Well,
don't have
New York is just a little tiny. It's just a little tiny, but I don't travel as much as I used to. And I think, especially since COVID, it has dropped off even more. And so, one of the things that I do is I make Zoom classes to teach online as well, because, it's a
and
practical.
people like that because they can see it. Yeah. I mean, and probably you don't miss the traveling. It's different now than it used to be. I used to have these 90-pound trunks on wheels with, all my clothes. You can't travel like that anymore. And then let's see. Oh, patterns. Okay, I forgot about that. After I was doing Home and Garden, Vogue called me and asked me to come to New York. They were distressed that all these people were quilting, and they wanted to know why.
Mhm.
And I thought, I'll tell them why. These darn patterns don't fit anybody.
Yeah.
So I went to New York and I had a sheet of paper with all the things that were wrong with the patterns. It was too broad in the front, not big enough in the back. The necks were too. I mean, I was carried away. I probably had about 14 things.
Mhm.
And after I said this, there was a silence in the room, and I'll never forget. The president said, actually, we brought you here because we were hoping you'd put your name on a line of our patterns. I said, you've got to be kidding. I'm not putting my name on those patterns. and and then I sat there and I said, I'll tell you what, I'll do it if I can develop my own sizing system because I know I've taught fitting so long, and so have you.
Yeah.
And we know those patterns didn't fit.
Yeah.
And I said, so what I did is I had 300 people in series over to my house, all different sizes, and I had pattern makers there and pattern graders. And I said, I want you to look at these people. They may be big, but they're not big everywhere.
Right.
And I found that the shoulders didn't keep growing and all this. So I developed this sizing system called Today's Fit.
Mhm.
And after I did that, took a while, then I started doing patterns for Vogue. And I did over 200, I think. I can't remember exactly. I stopped doing them last year.
Mhm.
Why? I guess with the state of the world and the way people dress, it seems kind of ridiculous. I, I felt I did them long enough. I still use a lot of my own patterns, but I just thought, who am I designing these for anyway? I mean, you see people on the street, even I went to the American Sewing Guild last week, and a lot of people are not wearing clothes they made. And I think some were, but,
Yeah. Mhm.
so I don't feel it's a bad decision. I don't miss it. I enjoyed it. But it took a lot of time because I used to make it 5 times in different fabrics to make sure it really worked.
Yeah.
But I was thinking, what did I like? You're a designer. I'm not.
Mhm.
I am a sewing teacher. How did I end up designing these patterns just for both? But what did I like to do? I like writing the instructions.
Okay.
And the designs I would come up with, I think I'm an observer of people. And I like to look at what looks good on people and try to think, what for different sizes? Not everybody is skinny mini.
Right.
What things would work? And so that's how I design, trying to find things that would work on people.
Mhm.
And then I loved writing the instructions. And I know it sounds so. I first admit I'm not a designer. I didn't copy things, not per se, but I would copy things that I'd see. I think, that's a good idea. I'll do that neckline, maybe the sleeve and that kind of thing. So I did that for a long time. And let's see, I guess that's my career kind of.
Well, let's circle back and talk about your books.
Oh, okay.
How they started, Fabric Savvy, which I tell my students, there's a list of books that I say to my students, these you have to have in your library. And one of them is Fabric Savvy. But it started with the power sewing?
The very first one started called Fear of Sewing.
Okay.
It was a little tiny book, like a little pamphlet.
Mhm.
And I just had these students that were terrified to do anything. So I self-published that. And I didn't really have enough money to do it, but the printer said, okay, I'll front it. You can pay it back after.
Okay.
That was the advantage of being young and flirtatious.
Yes.
So anyway, then Power Sewing came about as I had written all these columns, and people would come in with books with columns pasted in it. And I thought, you know what I'll do? I will do a bunch of, I'll do a book where I put the good columns in there and add to them. And so that's how Power Sewing came about. And I published that by my father. My father died. I think about the inheritance people get now. My brother and I each got $42,000.
Okay.
And I self-published.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, I don't care if anybody buys this. I'm going to spend my money doing that. And I did that. I ended up being a very good thing. I ended up making about $150,000. And then let's see, Fabric Savvy. Oh, when I was doing the television show on Home and Garden, I got tons of people would send garments to me, Kenneth, and they would say, what is wrong with this? The stitches are not right. So I thought, what people really need is they need a book to tell them how to work with these fabrics.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so that's how it came about. And then I started writing it. Oh boy, how would I write it? I would get some fabric and I'd sit the machine and try to make something with it. Mm-hmm. It took about 2 years. And then you were the only other person I knew that sewed as much as I did.
Yes.
So I remember I sent it all to you. I said, argue with me. If you think this isn't any good, or just get rid of it. And you were great. You were really good.
It was a pleasure.
And because I could trust you, other than you and I didn't know anybody that sewed like us.
Yeah.
And so that book has certainly sold.
Well, one of the things I love about it is because you can tell it was written by someone who sews, because it's spiral bound. It opens flat. It's all in one page. The needle, the foot, the everything you need.
Yeah.
It's just, it's brilliant.
You don't want to read on and on. Well, then that was in 1999 we did that. And then in 2005, I did it again. They wanted an update. I added some more fabrics to it. And then after that, you'd think I would stop. But no. Todd asked me at that time, they wanted to get into the home deck market. And they asked me if I would do a home deck book. And I said, I'm not really into home deck. I mean, I make a couple pillows and stuff. And they said, but maybe you could team up with somebody who's in the business. Mm-hmm. And I thought, okay. So I found this woman, Debbie Valentine, and she was very, very good, very exacting. And we wrote a book together. Mm-hmm. And it's called Sewing for the Home. But at that time, I don't know what was going on at Taunton, but they published it. I mean, they put spiral bound hardback, but they never promoted it. I never saw it anywhere. It was really sad because it's not so much that I worked hard on it, but she worked really hard on it. And she never got very much money. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Okay. But
now,
then
the fitting book.
Yeah.
Yes. Tell me about that one. Yes.
So then I was still teaching fitting, and I don't know whether this is true or not, but I think a lot of the fitting problems are caused, here's the trolley, by people not knowing what their fitting problems are. So they just willy-nilly do all these different things. They have a hard time thinking of themselves in the abstract. So what I did a book called Fast Fit, and I could do cartoons, and I like that. And I tried to describe, here's the problem, and then go into the solution. So I did that. And then let's see, was that the end of the books? It should have been the end, but no, I think
so there's Power Sewing, and then I remember more Power Sewing.
Power Sewing.
And then was there an omnibus edition?
No. So then a publisher, somebody my brother knew, wanted to take my self-published books and really put them out there. Okay. And he did Power Sewing and more Power, and he did a great job. He even had them in a bookstore on Fifth Avenue. Nice. But the problem is he absconded with the money and left for Australia. So that was
yeah. It sounds like
That
my
was,
first publishing experience. Long
yeah,
ago.
it's pretty.
Yes.
You had that too? Oh,
First book, yeah. It was different details, not important, but what I've learned is you get the money up front, you get a big fat whopping advance. So that's what I do now.
oh, now see, I never did that. And so then so then I wasn't writing any more books. Then what I realized is that I really love teaching hands-on. I had always lectured and I liked doing that, but I really wanted to sit down with people. So I started these seminars in San Francisco where people would come for a week and they would sew with me and all week. And then Saturday I'd take them fabric shopping. Saturday night they'd come to my house for dinner. It was fun. And I did, I think, 10 of those a year for 14 years.
Wow.
And I loved it. And I'd probably still be doing it. But at 72, I got some big back problems. I think we're hauling on those trunks. I had a back operation and it's successful, but I can't work like I used to. So I stopped doing those. And so then I was still lecturing, but I wasn't doing the things. See, what's hard on my back is standing for 10 hours a day. And I would just walk around and help people. So, but I loved her. I did it with Elka Haynes. She's couture trained. She started when she was 14. And I learned a lot from her. I mean, it was wonderful. And I think what I missed the most are the people. The people were wonderful. So then I guess, and then some people were saying, you know how you do this? You walk around and you look at something and you make a comment. And someone said, well, why don't you put a book together of all those little tips you do when you're teaching hands-on? I said, okay, maybe I'll do maybe 50. Ended up being 550.
Wow.
And I ended up self-publishing again because I wanted to do a book called The Toolbox 1 and 2 that were like paragraph tips. And I wanted it spiral bound. And I knew Taunton didn't do spiral bound anymore. I wanted to be hardback. And I wanted to put a DVD in the back. So I self-published those, sold those, still sell those. I stopped selling things online. It's just too much. Right now, I just don't want to have a business like that anymore. I just don't want to be in business. I just want to have fun now.
Well, that's a reasonable goal.
And so I don't think I'll be writing any more books. I don't know. I don't know.
I think you're going to write something. I don't know what it will be, but I think you're going to write something.
But as you know, I wrote a little outline of things, and I thought, no wonder I was tired. The other day I was cleaning something out, and I found a little notebook, and it said on the front, things have got to change. And I wrote all the jobs that I had, and then I wrote down whether they paid a lot. A lot of them didn't pay very much. And I decided I had to let go of some, and I did. And that changed everything. Because I felt I had to write for magazines. I was still writing the columns. And I had all these kids, and I love children and didn't want them to feel cheated. So, but fortunately, I had a lot of energy, and I used to get up at 7 o'clock and go full up till 11 at night. And then I would wake up at 2:30 and I would write from 2:30 to 5.
Wow.
And go back to bed. But I could never do that now. And
yeah.
So that's kind of the story. Fortunately, people always ask me, how did you do so much and have 4 children? You can't do it all at the same time. First of all, you have to have a husband that is flexible enough in his job and likes children enough. Our kids always say it was like being raised by 2 mothers.
Okay.
Because one of us was always there. And he was never resentful. He knew all the things I wanted to do. At one point, I was offered a job in New York as running Simplicity.
Okay.
And it was a lot of money, but I didn't want to leave San Francisco.
Yeah.
And my kids were young, and I just didn't want to bring them up in New York. And I've never regretted that decision. I don't have many regrets, really, except the one I told you about earlier.
Well,
I'm fortunate enough to be married to a very happy man. We're both healthy. He's almost 85 and I'm 81. And we run all around. We go to movies, we go to plays. how we started on these crazy trips is after I told you I missed the people. So I've always traveled. So I've been going to Morocco. And so people said, oh, I'd like to go to Morocco. So
Mhm.
I did like 7 trips to Morocco where I took like 10 to 12 people.
Wow.
And then, but last year was my last one. I thought, 80-year-olds should not be herding people around in Morocco. But I loved it. So that's my last one. And I do every year, I take a group to Florence in October.
Mhm.
And I could still do that because, it's flat.
Yeah.
Morocco is a little bit, but it's so fabulous.
Mhm.
So I won't do Morocco anymore. I'll do Florence. I have a daughter that immigrated to New Zealand this year.
Mhm.
So we'll be going to see her. And maybe I'll take a group of people to New Zealand.
Oh,
I
wow.
read about this awesome train. Listen to this, Kenneth.
Really?
You
Okay.
it goes from the top of New Zealand to the bottom of New Zealand.
Okay.
And you get off every day at 4:00, tootle around in a little town, have dinner, spend the night at a hotel, and get back on the train the next day.
Nice.
Goes for 11 days. Doesn't that sound fun?
Sounds interesting.
So now you can ask me any question you want.
Oh gosh.
Probably talked your ear off here.
No, I just, there's so much. I really admire what you've done. And again, like I said earlier, you were the one who arm twisted Marcy Tilton, because my understanding from back channels was that she wasn't necessarily sold. But I remember meeting you. You were wearing a leopard print hat. Marcy was doing a tour, and she brought you to
Yeah.
the studio on 8th Street. That was like way in the beginning. And I remember you introduced yourself. You said, I'm Sandra Betzina. I write a sewing column for the Chronicle. And you started asking some questions, and kind of that was that. And then my studio partner, Marshall, knew Norman Peterson, who's Marcy's
husband.
And he said to Marcy, and I mean, that's how Marcy, I think, found my studio. But, my understanding from back channels was that you really twisted her arm and said, you have to have him teach a class. And she did.
Well, you were so good. You had so many cool techniques. Obviously you should be teaching a class.
Yeah, but someone, and you were the one, saw that, and did the arm twisting. So I'm forever grateful.
Oh, listen,
So, yeah.
You would have done incredible things regardless. Tell us about what you're doing now.
Well, I'm working on, the Doll Couture came out, and what I'm told is that it's going to be coming up on its 3rd printing, and it hasn't been out a year. So I'm rather pleased about that.
Wow.
And so the possibility has been dangled in front of me, but you know how this is. It's not real until there's a contract. I was approached, and they said another book with red carpet looks.
Ooh.
And I said, well, Crazy Bella, because there has to be an event for these red carpet looks. I said, and there has to be a little bit of a story like Doll Couture.
Of course.
Yeah. So Crazy Bella will be the commentator on the red carpet at this Broadway opening. So that's the idea. And so, see, I believe in the build it and they'll come sort of thing. So that's what this is. This is an experiment.
Okay. Yeah.
Because if this particular situation doesn't play out, I'll just pitch it to someone else.
Well, I just think with those dolls, you could make a lot of money, and the things could be hand sewn. It would be a way a mother and daughter could work together.
That's the idea. Or, grown up people making things.
Yeah.
I've actually sent a copy to Barry Manilow to say, I just thought you might enjoy seeing what in my imagination eventually happened to Lola. So,
interesting.
And so, there's FIT, there's traveling around, there's, all of the usual stuff. I got my husband who's sweet.
How
And,
nice.
you talked earlier about the first husband. When I was living in Oklahoma, I dated a guy named Daryl, and Daryl was kind and he was decent. And I was 23. What did I know? I thought guys like that came along all the time. And what I learned was that they come along once every 30 years. And I split up with my first husband back in '87. I kind of, in my mind, it was like, if I find another one like Daryl, then I'll settle down. And when I met Andrew, his opening line was, I was wearing a pair of jeans made out of Fortuny cotton. His opening line was, is that real Fortuny? And it was like,
hey, he knew about fashion.
And so, and he's he had costume design, the little sketches in Doll Couture. Those are his.
Huh.
You know,
So he's talented.
so he,
Well,
yeah.
kindness. I find that older I get, the kindness in a mate, in people, people with each other. A lot of us know single people that don't have anybody to take care of them. We need to step up to the plate and try to help some people. It's a strange world we're in now.
True.
You know?
Yes. And so part of what I do is I make doll clothes. That is what got me through the pandemic, is making doll clothes. And
Ah,
if you go on my Lola has her own Instagram, Lola the Showgirl 24, as in 2024. And so if you go all the way back to the beginning, you get the backstory on Crazy Bella and the blackmail attempt, and they arrested the guys, and there was a court trial, and there was all of this. And
you're a writer. You're a writer as well, aren't you?
so it dovetailed into the stories in Doll Couture. So, for anyone out there listening, there is backstory. And so the next book, really, I'd like to make Crazy Bella, whether it's the red carpet looks, or my husband said Crazy Bella operates in this
I like the title.
Well, she operates in this very unclear timeline, because she worked in the Red Cross during World War II. She was a showgirl at the Folies Bergère. She sang at the Café de Paris. She's a secret agent for the MI5 in the UK. She even has a spy car, which hasn't been shown yet. She has all of these different kind of parallel universes that we could kind of weave through. Yeah. So,
do you and your husband kind of talk about these stories? I bet you would.
Yeah, he has the greatest ideas. Just some of the headlines were his. He just, he'd say, "Oh, you should see this," and it's like, yeah, that's great.
That's so much fun when you can share something like that together. I'm so glad you're doing well. And your face shows it. They say after 40, we have the face we deserve. And your face is very happy.
You're very kind. Very kind.
It's true. This is really nice. I haven't seen you in a long time, so I feel like we've had a little visit. It's been very nice.
For those out there listening, again, Sandra Betzina, the Anti-Mama Sewing, has graced me with her presence today, and I hope you all enjoyed our little talk.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more about Sandra's amazing accomplishments, check out Kenneth's profile of her in the 2024 winter issue of Threads magazine, or at threadsmagazine.com.